Today is day 4,393 that Boswell has been in business, and we're really excited to have J Ryan Stradal here to have a conversation with Andrew J. Graff, for his debut novel, Raft of Stars. Of course, Stradal's author of books like The Lager Queen of Minnesota, Kitchens of Great Midwest, and a bunch of other stuff we love. And Graff has published his fiction and essays in Image and Dapple Thing. He also grew up in Wisconsin's North Woods, where this novel is set. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the two of them. I'm going to disappear, and we're going to enjoy a wonderful conversation. Thank you both so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Chris. And it's such a pleasure to be here with Andrew. If you haven't read his book yet, buy it tonight from Boswell. It's magnificent. You may not know it yet, but this is exactly the kind of book you want to read right now. I can't recommend it more highly. Buy it and buy it from Boswell. And I'd love to hear Andrew tell us a little bit about the book here at the top and read a little bit from it. So Andrew, you want to take it away and get us going?
Yes, sure. Thank you, J Ryan, so much for saying that. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Boswell Books. This is great. I wish I could be in Milwaukee in person. Maybe in the future we can do that. I'd like to read a little bit. I think as a way of introduction, I'll just read like 2 paragraphs, not a lot. And this is from early on in the book, and then I'll talk a little bit about this. So this is from chapter 1 of Raft of Stars, which came out this March. Both boys were covered in cornfield dust up to their armpits from gathering the turtles. And the turtles themselves were white with it, like they'd been shook up in a bag of frying flour Fish's mom used to batter chicken halves. It was a dry spring. The tractors that dragged the soil smooth last week raised dust clouds that hung in the air for hours. A frigid winter with too much snow, and now a spring without rain. The winter was hard on the wildlife. When what snow there was first melted, the boys found 3 deer lying dead in the woods beneath a cedar tree, eyes milky and open. It looked as if the animals had grown too tired of the cold and decided to lie down for a while, amazed that a winter so cold could exist even this far north. Poor damn things, Fish had said, after hesitantly prodding one with a stick to prove death didn't bother him. On the opposite side of the asphalt road, the ditch met marsh water. The water was cold and dark with silt, and the wet bank seeped into the toes of the boys' shoes as they squatted down to free the snappers. As they lowered each leathery creature into the water, the turtles seemed awakened by it, the way the dust washed away, the suddenness of submersion. The turtles craned their little heads forward and waved their legs and swam away into the silt and water. They were like pigeons taking flight in pairs from the roof of Fish's grandpa's barn, aimless and erratic, surprised. And I'll stop there. So that's from page 3, and I read that as a means of introducing the book, because I think it introduces us to the 2 main characters, nicknamed Bread and Fish, at the core of this novel, which is a wilderness adventure. And the 2 characters, Bread and Fish, very early on, one has an abusive father, the other, his friend, takes things into his own hands, and that casts them out into the wilderness of the fictional Marigami County in the north woods of Wisconsin, my home. Pursuing the boys into the forest are 2 casts of adult characters. There's the grandfather, Teddy, who is sort of a woods-wise Korean war vet, and he's accompanied on horseback by Sheriff Cal, the interim county sheriff, who is a transplant to the Northwoods and is doing a really poor job of being in the forest. And the other cast of adult characters consists of the boy's mother, Miranda, who is filled with a really fierce sort of faith, and her pursuit borders on recklessness eventually. And she's accompanied in canoe on the Northern River by Tiffany, the local gas station attendant in Clay Pot, Wisconsin, who is an aspiring poet with purple hair. So I read those two paragraphs to introduce the boys, and also the line, "Poor damn things." It's something that the grandfather says when a calf is born a runt, or a bird falls out of a tree. And it's one of the questions that I think a lot of the characters ask. Are we simply poor damn things, lost in this forest, or are we more than that? Are we going to be okay? So Raft of Stars, been working on it for about 5 years, and I'm so glad it's out. The last month has been just a pure thrill, and I've been having a blast talking to bookstores and hearing from readers, and talking to journalists. It's just been pure fun.
Yeah, and I gotta say, huge congratulations. You've got a book out in the world.
Yeah,
I've read that it wasn't the first book you set out to write. It's my story as well. My first manuscript will never see the light of day, and first I made peace with that, and now I'm very happy about it. But yeah, things happen as they need to happen. But I think this is such a wonderful book for this time, and such a wonderful representation of the Midwest. It's riveting, it's hopeful, and it's also a Midwest bestseller. So yeah, tell me more about how you feel and how this last month has been for you, as someone who, like yourself, who set out to be a writer. How has the culmination of years of dreams over the last month felt to you?
Yeah, it's been surreal, and I've been purely thankful for it. Thank you, by the way, Echo Books, who have just been terrific. Everyone there. You mentioned that it wasn't my first attempt at a novel, and it wasn't. I wrote a novel that is now in my sock drawer, and I spent about 7 years on that. And I began as an undergrad. I was in the Air Force, and then I did my undergraduate work. And I began as an undergrad writing this novel about my time in Afghanistan. Brought it to grad school with me. I was able to get an agent for it, and I was like, boy, here I come, world. Look out, it's finally happening. And then it didn't, And I just cried in my pickup truck about it on Highway 41, no doubt, just north of Milwaukee. Thank you so much, or Green Bay territory. But so it took a while to start another one, but eventually, when I was, my wife and I and our first child were living on the banks of the Peshtigo River, and that's where I first began writing Raft of Stars. I was actually reading an essay by Flannery O'Connor in which she was talking about 3 sensory strokes to make something real. So I sat in my basement one night after about a year of not writing anything, and I wrote a gravel road and a blackbird on a cattail stalk, and 2 boys pushing their bikes down the road. And those are the boys who became Bread and Fish. So years later, in 2019, when the book was sold, you asked how it felt. I cried in my truck again. You know what I mean? I really did. It was just it was so affirming. And my agent called and said, I have good news. And I said, gosh, it has to be that. She asked me to call her back. And it was a rainy day, and I pulled my truck over to the side of the road, and it was good news. It was the best sort. So I've just been entirely thankful for everything that's been happening. It's fun. It's pure fun.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I saw your post on Instagram this morning about the Menominee River, which you wrote influenced the river in your novel.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, and hear more about, also in a more general sense, why you set your book where you lived in rural Wisconsin.
Right on. Yeah, so that's home. I grew up on the northern border of Wisconsin, Niagara, Wisconsin, up in Marinette County. And I grew up about a mile from the Menominee River. We lived on the end of a dead-end road We had a barn. I had two brothers. I had a husky. We had gardens. We had pumpkin fields, cedar swamps. It was a wonderful way to grow up, and I absolutely loved it, and I really loved that river. So when I came back home after years in the Air Force and years doing undergraduate and graduate work for my first teaching job, it was really enjoyable for me to start writing about that space. I think one of the things I'm happiest about is that I get to share my absolute love of that river with so many people now, and it's been so fun to hear people say like, oh, the setting and natural world kind of feels like its own entity, its own character. And I'm like, yeah, that's so wonderful to hear, But the Menominee River is where I first began guiding rafts. It's where I went fishing as a kid. And I love that space. And I just learned, because I've been down in Ohio for the last 5 years, I've been out of that loop. I just learned that it's been placed on American River's top 10 list of most endangered rivers. So, public service announcement. There is there's a sulfide mine trying to get permits to go in and build an open pit mine, and those can be extremely toxic. The mines have a lifespan of about a decade, and then the company goes away forever and leaves behind these tailings dams, these waste dams of rock that can leach acid and toxins for a very long time. So if anyone is interested in that, and I really hope everyone in Wisconsin is interested in learning more about what's going on the northern border, it's actually going to be built in Michigan. So the Wisconsin side is having not so much say about it. Please do check out the Wisconsin River Alliance. They're kind of leading the way on that, or jointherivercoalition.org. And there's a wonderful video that describes everything that's going on up there with that proposed mine. And I've actually placed that in the bio of my Instagram page. So if anyone wants to know about this, why is the Menominee River endangered? Please check it out. And you can go to Andrew J Graff _ if you want. And that's my Instagram. And the link is right there with the video. Like I said, I was just learning about it, and that's the river, that's the space that inspired so much of this book, along with the Peshtigo River. So I'm highly interested now in what's happening on the northern border.
Well, I love Fish and Bread. You mentioned their genesis earlier, coming out of, not exactly a prompt, but an inspiration via Flannery O'Connor. But they're rich in their lives and personalities and their names. Where did they come from? And did they change as you wrote?
Yeah. I think those two 10-year-old boys in a lot of ways, once they were on the page, and I had to start asking, well, who are you? Where are you going? What's this? Is this a story? What is going to be about? I really explored my own childhood a lot. Frankly, lighting off firecrackers in silos and tearing around country roads on our Huffies, and a lot of the sights and sounds and smells of their story is mine. When I first started writing it, I was writing from Bread's point of view, actually, for about 10 or 15 pages. And then when it became clear that he was going to have an abusive father, and there was going to be this very loud, inciting incident where Fish was going to take things into his own hands, I found that I had to change the point of view, because I have not lived Bread's story. I did not have an abusive dad, so I thought, oh, that's too important a story to tell. Whoever tells that story needs to tell it really, really well, and I don't think that's me. So I switched over to Fish's perspective because, I, like many others, have been near to that. I've seen it going on in other lives. So, I was also a new dad at the time, right? And I was really wondering what that meant. I'm still wondering what that means, by the way. You're a new father as well. Yeah, what does it mean to be a dad? These were questions that were very interesting to me. So I think bread and fish were a way of exploring that for me, you know? I wanted to get them out on that river. I wanted to see them survive and sort of thrive in that forest. And I enjoyed spending time with them, you know? So much of their story was mine.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Now, when you were writing this book and you knew what the setting was going to be and what the characters were going to be, I'm going to ask you this question because I get asked this a lot because of my setting. Like, did you think about marketability? Did you think, oh, no one's going to read a book set in rural Wisconsin? You just set that aside and be like, screw it. Like people are, this is the story I want to tell, and let's just see what happens. What was your mindset like as a person with an MFA who perhaps at one point might have been encouraged to think about, oh, this kind of book is going to get an agent or a publisher, and this other kind of book might not. How did you feel once you'd committed to this direction and setting and character?
Yeah, no, that's a funny question. I would love to know your answer to that as well.
Sure, I'll tell you. In fact, I'll tell you first because it's brief. It was because my first book failed. With my second book, Kitchens of the Great Midwest, which became my first novel, I was like, screw it. I know 3 people are going to read this book, and that's all I need. Like, I'm going to write the book I want to read this time. Yeah, this is the book I want to exist. I'm just going to write that one. Like, and what do you know? Yeah.
I think writing a book I would like to read was really important when I wrote Raft of Stars. That was the primary sort of voice. Is this what I want to read? This, am I having fun writing this and reading this? Yeah. And also, I think it's important to write a story that you can actually tell well. I said I pulled back from Brett's perspective or his point of view. So I'm like, I haven't truly lived that, and I don't want to mess it up because it's important,
Yeah.
So in terms of geography, like where to place a novel, I just thought, man, that's my space. Like Jane Smiley once gave a talk at Iowa, and she's like, find out what your story is, and then tell it. And I thought, yeah, mid-90s northern Wisconsin, like that's my story. I can tell that one. Yeah. And boy, like if I tried to write, like, the truth is I'm a Wisconsin guy. I grew up in a village on the end of a dead end road, and I'm still living in a village in Ohio. I'm not some cosmopolitan man, like, so if I tried to write the Brooklyn novel, everyone would know I'm faking it,
And frankly, the world doesn't need more Brooklyn novels. Yeah. I think the world needs more novels set in Wisconsin and set in Minnesota and Michigan and Ohio. And
it would just become. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Did you think about that too? About how this novel was adding to the conversation in terms of how the Midwest is described in fiction?
I don't know if that was a primary concern. Like, how would it represent the Midwest? I was just trying to tell the story well, and I did want to create a cast of characters that I felt were honored as real people, and maybe that's a nod to the Midwest or part of the country that may be overlooked at times. Miranda is a conservative Pentecostal. She wears her homemade denim dresses, and I wanted by the story's end for people to perhaps see something beautiful and fierce there, and not just the front. So yeah, and like I said, I just simply enjoyed writing it, because even though I moved away, we moved down to Central Ohio for about 4 or 5 years drafting this thing. I just got to close my eyes and go walk along the riverbanks again, and write my way through the pine forest. So it's a place that I love, and it's home. And I'm really, really glad that it's out there now.
Yeah. What was your favorite scene to write?
Oh man, I think I really enjoyed writing all of the whitewater scenes.
Mm.
When I came back from the military and I was going to college at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, I started guiding whitewater rafts in the Piers Gorge section of the Menominee during my summers off, and I just fell in love with it. It just got under my skin, and I can't get away from it. And nowadays, during my summers off as a teacher in Ohio, I drive down to West Virginia and I guide on the New River. So that was fun to share. You know, someone asked me recently, like, how much of this did you experience? You know, those types of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, all of them, except rafting in a tornado. I haven't done that yet, you know? But
Right.
yeah, a lot of it helped. And I remember, like, one in particular, you know, there's a scene in which Sheriff Cal takes a very bad swim through a rapids, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my experiences as a river guide, I remember training in West Virginia several years ago, and our boat flipped when we were training, and I fell into the crease of a hydraulic, which is sort of a sideways whirlpool in the river. It just folds back on itself.
Whoa.
Yeah, who wants that, you know? But the way to get through them is to turn yourself into a little cannonball, and you have to go down to the river bottom. That's the way out. You can't swim out. You have to go down so that the harder current underneath can push you out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's horrible. I don't care for it, you know? But I remember doing it, and I remember being tucked into a ball and bonking along the river bottom and having these crystal clear thoughts. Like a really clear, long thought process was happening. So I thought, yeah, Cal can have long thoughts as he's doing the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
So those were fun scenes to write. You know, the rivers, I love rivers so much. I love whitewater rivers.
Mm-hmm.
Those were a blast to try to share and try to depict. But yeah.
Awesome. That was a wonderful description. I totally remember that scene, and like the interiority of someone who's basically drowning is absolutely intriguing. And it was it's so cool to hear the genesis of that.
Yeah.
You've also talked in interviews about wanting to instill a sense of hope in the reader, and how, you know, earlier you'd shelved the manuscript in part because it was dark, you know. So what drives you to seek hope in fiction?
Yeah, I think I want to seek hope in life, you know.
Yeah,
I really do. And I that first novel that I was working on that is in the sock drawer was sort of like my angry novel. You know, I got out of the Air Force. I had been in Kandahar, Afghanistan. I came home, and I was studying art for the first time, and I think I made what I see as a mistake of assuming that art has to be dark in order to be real. You know, that it has to be moody, that it has to be gloomy, and I, like my enlightened undergraduate snarky self, like, love that stuff. And I think it's valid, you know. It's a valid project that art can look anywhere it wishes. But eventually I kind of found it like, it's like beating the low note on a piano, you know, like it resonates, but it's kind of a simple thing to do, right?
Yeah. Right.
And what's the hard thing to do in life is to know that, like, eyes wide open, I see the hardship and feel it, and I'm still gonna wrestle out, you know, some hope, you know, look for light. So once I, you know, started reading books that I thought did that, and once I started trying to write that way, I think a greater complexity arises pretty quickly, you know, characters who are not just sort of, you know, kicked into the abyss at the end of a story, but characters who are right at the edge of the abyss, like so many of us, and are trying nevertheless to keep it together, you know, to be okay.
Yeah.
And man, is that not the story of 2020? You know, our global experience has been like are we going to be okay? How do, like, we've been swimming in so much mystery. So when people read the book and say that they felt a little bit hopeful as they close the last pages,
yeah,
beautiful. Thank you. That's the highest praise.
it's a wonderful thing to give a reader. And I agree, it's harder. It's more of a challenge because you have to believe it yourself, and it's not always easy to believe it. I mean, as you mentioned, there's been some pretty dark times recently, and you know, for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of reasons to wake up every day and read the news and go, when are things ever going to get better? So to defy that and to, I don't know, I think it's a Midwest characteristic. I mean, you know, we both grew up in places where you could have snow 8 months of the year. And depending on your attitude about snow, that's not always a hopeful thing. So, you know, but yet you survive, you persist, and you not only trudge through, but you make the best of it. You try to have a good time doing it. And I think about the attitude of my grandparents and my parents a lot when I think about what puts the hope in my books. And I agree, that's probably not something a lot of writing teachers emphasize, you know, and certainly a lot of the, as you implied earlier, a lot of the writing that we're encouraged to look upon as canon or praiseworthy work tends to be on the darker side. I remember the first time I read Grapes of Wrath and just going, oh my God, I wish I could write this. And I'm glad I don't, actually. I'm glad that book existed. I'm not sure if anyone needs to rewrite it, or we need another version of it. But I remember how the ending of that book made me feel, in its utter complete lack of hope. And I don't know, I as a writer, I feel I don't need to, you know, that's not going to be my jam. I'm going to sit down every day and concentrate on like what I perceive I want to see in the world.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. And reading your work, I would agree that is not your jam. You know what I mean? Yeah, I when I read your books, I see them as hopeful. And you know, that in no way implies a sentimentality. It's not an oversimplification to say, you know, that joy and redemption and hope also exists amidst the trials. So yeah, I get that sense when I read Lager Queen of Minnesota. I was like, yeah, I don't feel crushed by this. I like that. You know what I mean? I've been taken through some real places, but thank you. And I guess it kind of comes down to, like, there's enough in life that can crush us, you know? So I don't see it as my project to create more. Go ahead, man.
Oh, who was a writer you read early on when this started to reveal itself to you, that hope was a possibility in fiction?
Yeah, I would say it was during my time at Iowa as a graduate student that I started thinking, oh yeah, maybe that's better. And I think it's because my life started shifting at that moment too. You know, I was newly married. We were very happy. We'd like go to Lake McBride and like eat fruit on a quilt on the grass. I was like, this goodness also exists. I can write about it, you know?
Yeah. So, this is what Paul Simon was singing about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Marilyn Robinson and Paul Harding was visiting there at the time as well.
Yeah.
And you know, being able to sit in his seminars and hear him talk about darkness or lightness in art, and Robinson as well, was probably very formative, or at least it gave me a lot of permission to try, you know? Mm-hmm. Marilyn Robinson said in her 75th address to the Iowa Writers Workshop that gloom is all the rage today, you know, like culturally, right? And she kind of like shook a wise finger at it, I think, and said, I'm not gonna, I want to do something a little bit harder. I want to acknowledge it, but then maybe point elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, me too, Marilyn Robinson, please. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. I really love the way you related that. So, you know, you mentioned the MFA program. You know, you've lived most of your life in the Midwest, MFA, undergraduate MFA. What's something you learned in your MFA program that changed you as a writer, and something you learned outside the program that changed you as a writer?
Wow. Yeah, the first half is really easy, and that came from a Marilyn Robinson class.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved being in her class. You know, the whole experience of an MFA program was just beautiful. If I could just do an MFA over and over for the rest of my life, that would be pretty fun, you know? Just 2 years just getting to sit and listen to Marilyn Robinson's and Paul Harding's and James Allen McPherson.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
It was great. And yeah, I got to play softball with a lot of people. There was always a fun poets versus fiction writers.
Hilarious.
Yeah, it was very adamantly, very poorly played softball. It was fun, you know?
Okay.
Yeah. But Robinson once said in class, just one line that really changed everything for me. And she said, you know, we have to remember what we're trying to do is put an actual human mind onto the page in all its complexity. And I thought, wow, that was something I chewed on with some friends for a couple of weeks, you know, and that informs just about everything. Things like nonverbal behaviors of characters, right? What's on your mind, dear character? What is your present disposition and your personal history? That's going to teach me how your arm is going to move when you're, you know, in that particular conversation. What characters notice in a room or a scene? Like what, you know, O'Connor says you need at least 3 of the 5 senses to get a scene really kicking. Mm-hmm. Which ones do I choose, right? I can always lean on the mind of the point of view and say, well, what would you be seeing right now? What concerns you? And how would you describe that once you notice it? So writing the mind is something that I feel like that to me felt like it's the gem of the MFA that I took with me, and I'm trying to pass on to other students as well. It even informs narration, you know, if you think of like, well, how does a story move? Not all stories move according to you know, purely plot, right? I think of novels. Marilyn Robinson's are a good example where it moves according to, well, where would the mind go next?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's like the master class. That's where I haven't been able to touch that yet. Oh, yeah. I'm too afraid to, but yeah, writing the mind has been just critical. What did I learn outside of the program? I think I learned joy, you know? Yeah, I think I spent a little bit too much time in my 20s being kind of grumpy, you know. That's a euphemism, but yeah, I was learning that joy and hope and beauty exist and are worth pursuing. So that's where it started.
Yeah, awesome, great answer. You know, okay, you're a parent like me. Yeah. When do you write?
When do I write?
Yeah.
I don't write at home. That's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have an office then at the college where you teach that you write at?
Yeah. So I've done all of my writing at my office during the last decade. You know.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So which has been nice. It's always been close to home.
Mm-hmm.
Even during the summer, to go in for a few hours in the morning or something during the weekdays has been really nice. But yeah, my wife and I have 4 young children. So like, thank you, Heidi, to my wife for, like, right now she's putting 4 kids to bed by herself, so I can do this. And they're wonderful, but it's also hard. You know what I mean? And if I need to get work done, I can't sit at the kitchen table anymore. Yeah.
No. Very true.
How have you been working during this last year, or the last year with the new baby too?
Yeah, I've worked it out with Brooke. You know, she works part-time as a nurse. Right now she's administering the vaccine at a facility called Hanson Dam 3 or 4 times a week. And those days I have Audie. And those days, right before he wakes up, he's miraculously and this won't last because nothing does. Miraculously sleeps till 9 most mornings, and I wake up around 6 or 6:30, so that's a couple hours. And then after he goes down at 7, he sleeps 14 hours, at least right now anyway. I don't expect it to last. He'll change it up. He changed it up a few times already. Like, so at morning and nights is the rest of the time. You know, he's 16 months old, so requires pretty undivided attention, I'd say. Yeah, at the very least, I don't like splitting focus. I'll put it that way. I could, you know, like make a meal or something, but he can't, you know, yeah, I can't take my eyes off of him. And I don't like to either. I'm an old dad. I'm going to turn 46 this year. He's my first child. And it took Brooke and I a long time to have him. And we like to joke that he's the most desired child we know because of the amount of effort we went through. So yeah, there's the miracle of, like, this is probably also true for subsequent children, but being a first-time father, it's also looking at this child every day and going, how did you get here? Like, where are you from? Like, who are you? And just waiting for them to tell you and marveling at how they do every day. It's a marvelous experience.
Yeah.
But also, you know, a messy one, a loud one, you know, one that is not always commensurate with the aims of being a novelist. But yeah, it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
And he's changed my life as a writer, in terms of point of view, in terms of thinking about narrative and some of the elements I put into my writing. Yeah, it's remarkable. But yeah, like I said before, it's constantly evolving. You know, he'll be, you know, like 2 and 3 and then 4, and give me new challenges and joys. as you know. Yeah.
Well, good for you, man. I'm happy for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's wild. You know, before I had kids, I remember people saying things about being a parent, you know, like statements like, I would die for my children. And I always thought, as someone without kids, like, that sounds rational and noble, good, you know?
Right.
But then I felt it in my spine when, you know, our first came. I thought, oh yeah, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's irrational, you know. It doesn't make that sort of sense, but it's a given. So
you put it perfectly. Yeah. 2 more final questions, and then we'll open it up. We've got over 100 people here, and I imagine there's a number of questions. We've got at least one already. So 2 more quick ones from me, and then we'll turn it over to the crowd. Do you read when you're writing a novel? And if so, what and why?
Yeah, I don't think my reading habits necessarily change when I'm writing. Frankly, you know, I've always got a book cooking, and that's just how the evenings go. You know, the kids are in bed, and it's whatever o'clock. It's time to just read a chapter or 2 from whatever I'm reading. So I'm definitely not the sort of person who can put things away. I mean, if I didn't want to read while I was writing, like, when would I read? I would take like a 5-year break and say, sorry, I'm not reading any books because
right.
Yeah, that would be really difficult.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, I think one of the funnest things about you know, the lead up to publication and publishing, I'm of course brand new at this, has been meeting other authors in talks and getting their work, you know, getting advanced copies of their work. Sometimes you're gonna go do a talk with these 3 authors, and these books come in the mail, and I'm just like, I'm like a kid in a candy shop, you know, like, yay, like brand new fiction to read. It's been a blast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's been one of my favorite parts too. Since I think even before my first book came out, I was getting galleys. And then when I went to my publisher for the first time in New York, they said, oh yeah, anything on Viking, just let us know, we'll send it to you. I was like,
yeah,
What? I've tried not to abuse it. I mean, still a Minnesotan boy who's like, when someone says, here's a jar of free candy, I'm just going to take one, and probably not even my favorite one, because it might be someone else's favorite. Take my second favorite one, so I've asked a couple of times, but, and only when it was like, oh, I hope I'm not putting them up asking for this. This isn't like a brand new in-demand thing they're trying to get sales numbers for. I think of all the ways I'm apologizing for asking. But anyway, no, it's been one of the best parts about the job is getting contemporary fiction, because I love contemporary fiction, and I think you probably have to write it, and to write it well anyway. You should. I keep telling my students this. I was like, you have no business writing in a genre you don't read. I'm surprised by a number of people who try, though. It was like, I'm going to write a science fiction book. Like, can you recommend any? I'm like, those two questions don't go together. You should know. You should be in love with it. You should be propelled by that passion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I can tell as a reader when a writer doesn't seem to like their own protagonist, or is trying to make a point. And not just tell a story, but is a little heavy-handed with their themes, and is writing this book because they're making an argument as opposed to, and I feel like, oh man, I'm always, what's the word? Looking for more things to read, to broaden my own taste and experiences, but also, oh boy, I feel like I'm jumping the rails here, but as a writer, I feel like you never quit learning, and without the benefit of an MFA, I just have an undergraduate degree and not even in English or writing. I've had to pull so much of that from the world around me and take it piecemeal. But anyway. Yeah, that had a lot to do with my questions earlier about your MFA versus non-MFA experiences, because sometimes people ask me, like, should I get an MFA? And I'm like, I don't know. Should you? It's up to you. I think there's a lot of benefit in it. But I would say, I think in my experience, I probably could have said I would have become a better writer sooner if I had had an MFA. It took longer for me to become the writer I am. Than if I had, I think. But anyway.
Yeah, definitely don't need one. Definitely don't need an MFA. I think it provides, it kind of sections off 2 years and says, here, really focus on this, and if you can get a stipend, then you can really focus on it.
Yeah.
So that's a great benefit, Yeah. But it's not a necessity by any means. That's for sure. Obviously, right?
Well, finally, what's a book or two you've read lately that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I just finished The Girls in the Stilt House by Kelly Mustian, and that just came out like a week ago. That's wonderful. It's set down south in the early 20th century, and that one was a very exciting read. I just finished it last night and said, yes, I really liked it. It was one of those advanced copies that I got, and it took me a month to read because I'm a slow reader. But beyond that, I've been trying to catch up on some other contemporary titles. I read This Tender Land by which was wonderful. And I also finally got
your book.
I was like, well, I think this is, some people have said they feel it's in a similar space, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's wonderful, And then I also read Where the Crawdads Sing. Not that one was my recommendation, but I'm like, what a phenomenon, and I enjoyed that too. I get it. There's a reason why so many millions have read that. It's really good storytelling. So,
that's so nice to hear. Yeah, I haven't read it yet myself.
Yeah. I enjoyed those. So, awesome. How about you? Do any titles come to mind that you've read?
Definitely. There's another Wisconsin author named Christy Clancy, whose second book, Shoulder Season, is coming out soon, and I love that book. I think it's better than her first book, Second Home. It's set in Lake Geneva.
Nice.
Absolutely wonderful book.
awesome.
There's another book called Four Dead Horses by a debut author named K.T. Sparks. It's set in the world of cowboy poetry. And I love a good book that forces me to inhabit a realm I know nothing about and stokes my interest in it. Like cowboy poetry was something I'd only heard of anecdotally from a friend of mine, Carson, who wrote about it as a journalist. I've never experienced it. I have no knowledge of it beyond what Carson related to me. But this book it's absolutely wonderful and it's hilarious. I laughed out loud at a book for the first time in a while reading Four Dead Horses.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's open it up to some folks here in the crowd. I'll start in the chat window. We had a question sent in advance from Susan, and she wanted to know where up north did you do most of your hunting and fishing?
Well, I grew up in Marinette County, and I grew up on a farm. So we just had, we had a farm outside Niagara, Wisconsin, on 88 acres of fields and forests. So that's definitely where I grew up. And then if I were to go fishing, we just always headed to the Menominee, or one of the many nice lakes in the area. So I'd love to get back. My wife and I moved away from Wisconsin when we just had one young kid, you know what I mean, and another on the way. But it seemed easier. We were like, yeah, of course we can move wherever we wish, and it'll be fine. But now with 4 children, we both really feel the absence of family. It would be really wonderful to get back around uncles and aunts and grandmas and grandpas. So
yeah.
Yes, so like dear Wisconsin, I'm trying to come home. We really are. So I'm a visiting professor at present. So it's fine if I'm openly on the market. So
okay,
looking, yeah, if I can find a teaching position in back in Wisconsin, we will most likely get back there. Either that or like Southern California or Hawaii. One of those 3,
yeah.
Hawaii or Wisconsin will do just fine. So
yeah, you'll enjoy Southern California. I can promise you that. I've been here for 23 years. I miss the Midwest immensely, but I've been quite happy here.
Yeah. Can I ask, do you surf?
No.
No?
No, I would die.
Yeah. It sounds so attractive to me.
Yeah, but no, I think I see people doing it and they seem to have fun.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Most of them do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's remarkable to me that they go into that water in the condition that it's in and they come out alive. It's cool.
Yeah.
That's the first time doing it. Yeah, no, unfortunately, yeah, that's one aspect of the Southern California experience. It'll always be absent from my own physical resume.
Right on.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, we should hit a few more questions here. We've got more coming in. Let's see. Oh, thank you, Doug, for reading, for your wife reading Lager Queen. Let's see. Doug's also read the review in Milwaukee Journal of Andrew's book. And oh, Larry asks, what writers inspire you, Andrew?
Well, as far as contemporary writers who are working in a space I really enjoy, Nick Butler is one. His last book, Little Faith, was just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like J Ryan, you're in the room, so it'll be awkward, but I love her novels very, very much. And Marilyn Robinson, I know I've mentioned her a couple of times, but she's always been an absolute favorite. And she's a novelist that I read her work and just think I will never be able to write like you. It's so different, and it's so lovely. But I love reading her books when they come out.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. There's a appreciation there that, oh man, it's like appreciating a star or a planet.
Yeah.
Somewhere never go, but it's beautiful all the same. I feel the same way about Marilyn Robinson. I think like she's just absolutely untouchable to me. Yeah. Anyway,
as far as more classic writers, I really like writers with who write characters with strong voices.
Mm.
So writers like Eudora Welty, all of her short stories just rock. Flannery O'Connor is awesome. I really like True Grit by Charles Portis.
Oh, yeah.
He has just that great protagonist, and it's just fun to listen to her voice and listen to her talk about others. You know, that's 40% of the joy of that story is just listening to her tell it. You know, Maddie. So
Magic.
Those are a few.
Yeah. Sheila asks, you talked about writing what you know. Is it harder for you to write your female characters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I just try to still write what I know and assume that I and my female characters are similar enough. You know, Tiffany is stuck in a small town, and she wants to write poetry. You know, she's got this artist heart and purple hair. So I just at a certain point, I think our desires and hopes and fears are similar. You know, I just tried to trust that, and then I try to trust readers. You know, once people start reading it and they say, you know, I don't think so here, with the boys or with any of the characters, that's been really helpful as well. Yeah.
And yeah, great answer. Barbara Stark asks, what was your inspiration for Cal?
Cal, you know, he's in his 30s, and he's a guy who is questioning his life, you know, or questioning the things that the life he's worked so hard to build. So, you know, he became a cop because people in his life seemed pleased when he said, I want to do this, you know, so he went with it. And then what he's wrestling with in the forest, what he's trying to shed is the realization of, you know, maybe the life I've created and worked so hard toward is not as pleasing as I thought, or I'm not particularly cut out for it. You know, I don't think Cal is cut out to be a police officer. I think those aspects came from my own life as well. I don't think I'm alone in wrestling with that. You know, mid to late 30s, you worked really hard all of your 20s to sort of situate yourself in some space, and then you wonder, like, well, you know, should I have just bought a van and moved to Southern California and learned to surf? You know, well, I think Cal is wrestling with some of that, some of those realizations. Yeah.
Yeah. And oh, here's a question I maybe should have handled at the time the topic was raised, but for, you know, readers who are unfamiliar, what's an MFA program?
Yeah, it's a graduate program in creative writing, a Master's of Fine Arts. So get your bachelor's degree, and then you can go off for 2 to 3 years and get that terminal degree in creative writing, typically fiction, nonfiction, or poetry. Yeah.
And the same person also wants to know if you're teaching online classes at the moment.
I am not teaching online classes at the moment. Wittenberg University has been using a hybrid model this year, so we've kind of, you know, had to break our classes into smaller sections to meet masked up and face-to-face, and then we meet online the rest of the time, or, you know, build in asynchronous work for the students. It's been a interesting year for students and teachers, most definitely. It's been an interesting year for anyone, but
yeah.
But boy, I'm sure looking forward to, I'm sure hoping that in the fall we can have some semblance of normalcy. That would be wonderful. I realized how much I miss spaces in the classroom. I was like, oh yeah. A lot of the joy of this job comes from nonverbals, you know, interacting. So I'm looking forward to that again.
Yeah. Daniel wants to know if this would be an appropriate book for an 11-year-old.
Yeah, that, you know, that would be a question for Daniel ultimately, you know. I think it definitely could be, you know. I don't think it's a very harsh text. I hope it's a book that a whole family could enjoy. Definitely teenagers and adults, absolutely. But depending on the 11-year-old or you know, young teen, I think that would depend on the individual. There are some harsh topics. There is an abusive father and things like that early on. So I'd leave that up to the family making the decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
And person named Aaron Graff, possibly a relative?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Asking too much.
Yeah. Right. Did I hear you say the sequel is going to be sci-fi?
I'm working on it. Yeah, the sci-fi. Yeah. Oh man, that's my big brother. Yeah, that's my older brother.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, he said he's gonna come out with a sequel called Raft of Mars.
Okay.
Hey,
Awesome.
Aaron, nice to see you.
And Jill from Ohio, north of Cincinnati, wants to know if your next book will also be a Midwestern book, if it's not set on Mars. Any hints on an upcoming novel?
Yeah, it is going to be set in the Midwest. I am working on one, and what was clear to me after spending years working on Raft of Stars is that I didn't want to leave the Northwoods yet. So I am definitely going to go back to that space, at least for now. I'm not finished writing about it. I want to go back to the forests and the rivers and the people. So I'm looking forward to sharing much more about that when it gets a little bit closer to ready. Right now, it's a definite work in progress.
Awesome. We have a question from a writer named Macy, who is a woman trying to write from the male POV and wants to know if there are important things to keep in mind that she could otherwise miss.
Wow. I think the best piece of advice is just to get a good reader in your corner, frankly. You know, I think I'd be pretty hard pressed to say like, and maybe I'm hearing the question wrong, but I'd be pretty hard pressed to say like, here's what to keep in mind when writing from a certain person's point of view, you know, get into their mind, get into their heart, right? Get into their personal history, know them well. And after that, boy, yeah, just get a reader. I found I needed the most help writing about the 10-year-old boys again, you know. I was trying to draw on my own history, but there were times where they weren't thinking like 10-year-old boys, you know. I think at one point in an early draft, Fish was having this sort of, he was giving this long existential paean to you know, the river and existence and the pain of existence, and a very smart reader said, you know, why don't you just have him think about the black bears again? I was like, oh yeah, that'd be better. So a good reader in your corner is gonna help iron out any problems.
Awesome. Okay, and one final question. I'll make it a two-part question because they're from the same people. Same person, Paulette, who wants to know what your intent was in terms of creating a main character, was a city guy from Texas, was an outsider in this rural Wisconsin environment. And also, she wants you to tell us more about the bear.
Yeah, the bear, thanks. Cal just sort of volunteered to be from Texas. You know, I don't think Texas had anything to do with it. But I did want an outsider to the Northwoods of Wisconsin, you know? And when I thought like who would be really uncomfortable in those Wisconsin winters, and when we were writing it, we had some record cold Wisconsin winters, like, you know, temperatures staying below zero for 25 days, you know, up in the UP and stuff. Texas came to mind, you know, and I thought, and Cal came to mind, and I thought, yeah, he's going to be out of place. And even with, you know, the differences between cattle ranching and cow farming, you know, he's going to have trouble with some of that, navigating some of those cultural things. So he seemed like a good fit for the outsider in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And the bear is something that sort of grew, you know, throughout the novel. You know, Fish's father's nickname was Bear. And in a later scene, we'd get the mother bear kind of fending off or protecting her cub. You know, much like Miranda, you know, going off in canoes after her son. And you know, the bears became an object that began to correlate to a lot of things in the story for me. Primarily this central question of Am I going to be okay? You know, am I alone? Am I going to be provided for? And I think it became a correlative to the wilderness itself. Like, here's this thing that's a threat. You're lost in the woods, you know? And also, here's this thing that sort of miraculously provides, you know, once the characters began to shed and co-labor with that river, so to speak. And then the closing scene, you know, and I don't want to give away too much for those who haven't read it, but I wanted that scene to remain a bit ambiguous, or rather fillable with a lot of different potential meanings, you know. That what does that bear correlate to? I think there are a lot of answers to that. So.
I love that. I think the best tool a writer has, or one of the best, is the reader's imagination. And I find they like to use it.
Yeah.
And they're going to use it whether if you want them to or not. So may as well give them a manifold opportunity, like the bear.
Yeah. I was just talking to students today about symbolism versus, you know, Eliot's objective correlative. And I think talk of symbol in literature often sort of shuts it down like it's a code to crack. Okay, the turtle equals this one-to-one relationship with Bread's hatred of his father or something. And then there, I cracked that nut, and now it's not a turtle anymore. Rather than that, I like Eliot's approach of, no, it's a turtle, and it's always going to be a turtle, but it correlates, you know, to these different emotional values and things in the text. And once you start looking at literature in that sense, it sort of broadens that possibility, and it's much more fun to play with. So I hope the bear correlates to a lot in the text.
Yeah. Well, I believe it does. And I think that's a remarkable and marvelous note to end on. Andrew, thank you so much for your honesty and your soul, and your wit and your transparency. It's been wonderful to meet you. I thought we would have a stimulating conversation. I didn't expect to laugh so much. It's been a joy just talking to you. And thanks so much for letting us into the world that created this book and your mindset throughout the time of writing it and since. So, man, hats off to you, dude. I mean, huge congratulations. It's such a joy to finally see this book that I received as a galley out in the world. And it's got to be awesome for you.
Yeah, it has been. And thank you, J Ryan, so much for taking time out of your day and working between naps to do this. It's been a pleasure to meet you as well. And I can't wait to read what's coming next for you. So thank you again, Boswell Books. Thank
you, Boswell.
And thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.
This seems like my time to jump in and say thank you both. This has been a wonderful, fantastic conversation. What a great book. What a great conversation. What a great couple of guys. Thank you for being here. At Boswell, we'd love to sell you a copy of this book. I read it. I do. I think it's great. There are all these big questions, but it's also full of adventure, and it's going to get you outside, which I think we could all use right now. Thank you all for being here. We wouldn't have a bookstore, virtual or otherwise, without you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.